Alright guys, welcome back to my channel, and I'm gonna react to a very interesting video that I just came across on the Dr. Phil show. As usual, the Doc is killing it, man. He seems to always come up with all these very interesting shows that talk about interesting things within culture. So let's get going.
Chest feeder, birthing body. By being more trans inclusive, are we erasing women?
Women are female and men are male. It's okay to say that.
Having female anatomy and being a woman are two different things.
But what is a woman then?
I'm a birthing parent.
Only female humans actually give birth.
Is this a valid debate, and is it going too far?
We are born biological women. We are different. We are different.
Is this a valid debate?
Listen, I gotta say, Doc always says like the most killer intros. The most killer intros that just kind of like suck you in there, like you just like, whoa, boom, man, you know. Did that look like a pregnant man or something? I don't know about it.
Debate, and is it going too far?
Well, I'll wait to see how the different sides represent themselves as far as the extremes, if it's too far. But I do think what I find fascinating about this topic is that there is merit to both sides, to each side as they're presented today, in the sense of cisgender women wanting to patrol the boundaries around the women's movement and how we do advocacy and how to organize with a unified sort of front. And there is certainly merit from individuals that identify as non-binary or trans, however, just non-binary, non-cisgendered women, to have a stake in this argument as well and to want to be included in a women's movement here in the United States.
Kara, why is this issue important to discuss?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and thanks for having the conversation. One of the frustrating things about this, I've been working on issues like this for many years now, and it's very difficult to have a conversation in the national media. So thank you so much for doing this. I do just want to say quickly, in your introduction, you said, and Susie mentioned cisgender. So I do not call myself a cisgender woman. I am a woman because I'm an adult human female, and I think that is a very important part of this conversation. I think it's really important that we.
Wow, that's a brave thing to say right there. Like, I don't consider myself a cis anything. I'm just a woman, plain and simple. So it's really interesting how the people that tend to make a lot of common sense, or that makes sense that's supposed to be common anyway, before we sort of go through this whole process where we consume a lot of drivel out there. They're the people that remind us of how easier a conversation used to be when we just look back to how easy and simple the conversation was, when it just concerns something that is simple and obvious and in your face, is a woman, and that's it. Before you anchor that with some other terminologies.
Be very clear and accurate in the language that we use. So that's why I think this is such an important conversation.
Well, I do too, and I think a lot of people are confused. A lot of people are, in their hearts, say, I love humanity, I love people, and it matters not to me whether someone is gay or transgender or whatever, but I'm afraid if I ask a question and say something wrong, then I'm going to say you're transphobic. You don't agree with everything I think. And that's not really been my experience. But I do think some people fear talking about it. And so I figured just charge a machine gun nest and let's just get out there and talk about it, because I think people do want to talk about this.
Yeah, people are kind of scared of saying things because they don't want to offend anybody. Because if you offend somebody, apparently if you offend somebody, well, then you will be categorized as something that is very unbecoming. So that's the number one reason why people don't want to have conversations about anything, is that they don't want to. They fear being stigmatized, and that's really pretty much it. And that's why I say that she's very brave for just saying that, listen, I'm a woman, plain and simple,
Shandy, what do you think about this? It's good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you too, Dr. Phil, and I'm glad that you said thank you for this conversation, because it's good that we're having the conversation. That's the only way we're going to move forward with it. I think that it's great that we're looking at these things, because I've been told that I'm not a woman because I can't have a period, I can't have babies, but there's actual women who can't do those things too. So it doesn't make them less of a woman. So opening the door to this, it's going to be amazing. I'm ready.
I don't know if my inability to make babies because I have a lower sperm count is the equivalent of someone who isn't born with male genitalia. If you know what I mean. I don't think that's the same thing. I think there's a difference between a defect, a health-related biological defect that is inherent of your nature, your gender. Because remember, a woman who isn't capable of particularly having babies because of a biological, when I say biological, I simply mean that because I can make an example of male, because I think we're easier to explain, because for some reason she's just not able to have babies. But it can be medically, you might find that there are improvements that are made in technology that have helped a lot of people, a lot of couples, to be able to have a child or have a baby. Then that tells you that she has the ability. It's possible to actually become pregnant. Our bodies don't always correspond to what we want 100%. That's something that's just well known. But I think there's a difference between understanding something that is a health impediment as opposed to me thinking that I can, I should be called a woman just because I fancy looking like a woman, or I kind of look like a woman, or I feel like I'm a woman, or whatever. And that has to do with emotions and other different type of things and personality.
Have you ever heard the terms chest feeder, birthing body?
I don't think women should ever be demeaned to something so simple as chest feeders. It's just nasty.
For me, I'd like to be called a woman.
When we talk about rights for women, it sometimes excludes members of the LGBTQ community. So I think it's important to have those kind of terms.
Very disrespectful.
As a woman, I don't feel like that's appropriate, and it makes me feel like people that use that term are superior to me.
As a trans woman, I think it's just really disrespectful because we are all human.
You go to a university, you hear these types of terms.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me.
The pedestal that women are supposed to be put on is getting ripped out from under them. They are destroying the very things that they believe they're fighting for. It's dangerous to women whether they realize that or not.
Well, the question is, by being more trans inclusive, are we erasing cisgender women, or as you were just saying, just woman, people whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth?
The way that you defined it is the way that it is ordinarily defined in society today by some, but it also assumes that there is such a thing called gender identity that we all have. That's an assumption, right? And it may turn out to be true. I don't think that it will, but it might. But it's important to at least acknowledge that we're making an assumption that gender identity is something we all have. I would say that I don't have one. I would just go back to saying I'm a woman because I'm an adult human female. I'm also a woman who cannot have babies. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that a woman who cannot have babies is a woman in a manner that it is not true that a male person could ever be a woman.
Merriam-Webster's definition of female.
I agree. That's what I was saying. There's a difference.
2020. 1A, of relating to or being the sex that typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs. B, having a gender identity that is opposite of male. They took a lot of heat for that.
Typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs, yes.
So they have a statement they would like me to read. Like thousands of other words in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster's entry for female has been added to over the years to reflect the ways the word is used. September 2020, we published an additional definition of female, having a gender identity that is the opposite of male, to reflect significant usage of that meaning. There has been no update to the entry since then, despite recent reports otherwise. That meaning is shown across all media in millions of examples going back to 1995, including phrases like transgender female athlete. That use of female could not be understood using the existing definitions, so a new one was added. This is the regular work of a dictionary. We chronicle the language to help everyone understand all the different ways words are used. Merriam-Webster does not invent words or meanings. Instead, we constantly monitor and review evidence of a word's use and make updates and additions as needed to reflect that evidence. We hope this helps explain why some of our definitions, including female, receive additions or changes over time. I think that's a fair explanation.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair explanation. What I've seen is with technology over the years, what Google does is, because it's such a very manipulated technology, is that it pulls and extracts words as used within popular culture narratives, and it gives a refined definition. That's if you look for a word using Google definition, or if Google gives you a definition of anything, it will probably reflect what is popularly used, as opposed to Merriam-Webster. If you go to a Merriam-Webster definition or any other source, they expand them a little more differently, especially if you look at, for example, the word. So it's becoming really relatively harder to have conversations when people are less academic and willing to understand that, look, you can't just go with whatever narratives people put out there. We gotta have a full-on discussion about these things to understand what a word reflects and why the reflection of that word means what it means, without just throwing it's patriarchy, it's defined by patriarchy. Okay, that's not helping the conversation. Okay, it's not helping. No, you're not helping. All right.
I think they look at it in context. Did you have a comment?
My name's Katrina.
Katrina,
I've been listening, and it's hard because I've always been female in my heart and soul and mind. I started transitioning when I was 7.
I've always known I was a woman. And for women to be like, well, you're not. I will always fight for women's rights. I will always want to be a part of the movement. It kind of hurts to hear that it's like, well, we don't accept you. But I'm like, I accept myself. Why can't you accept me?
Women who insist on accepting the reality of biological sex are often called hurtful. It can't be hurtful to speak the truth. It just can't be. It's important that women be able to say that women are adult human females without being told that that's hurtful.
Yeah. Listen, that's kind of like trying to make people feel guilty for your state of condition. I think that's quite manipulative right there. This is really interesting. Here's the thing. Why does she want other people to acknowledge it? Like, why is my state of agreeing with you the equivalent of your feeling accepted? Me acknowledging that I'm a male and knowing what a male is, and a female comes up to me, or transgender female comes up to me, and the individual be like, I'm also a woman, and I'd be like, yeah, nah, or rather they say I'm or it's a female, or she says, well, she's also a man. I'd be like, yeah, 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 no, I don't agree with that. Yeah, if it's really about you acknowledging yourself, if you already accept yourself, if being a female is what you call it, if you say that, listen, a woman to me is what a woman is, according to whatever I feel, according to however I define that, okay, fine. Society is saying, fine, let's keep it like that, let's keep it real. You say you're a woman, tell yourself you're a woman, that's okay. So then now, why do you want me to subject myself to your own ideas and your own narratives and your own however you want to fashion your ideas there about your own self-identification and so on. So it's because when society doesn't sort of go along with that, then you kind of like feel bad. Then people are not accepting me and so on, and it just turns into something else. So it's not. Oh God, I don't know.
I understand. Why do you say in the same breath that you're open to this conversation when technically you're not open to this conversation because you're still speaking from the space of what the reality is?
A second. It doesn't mean that just because the person doesn't agree with you, therefore they're not open for the conversation. Being open to a conversation doesn't mean that I'm saying I'm open to agreeing with everything. What are you talking about? Okay, let me allow it to finish.
That's not being open.
I'm curious.
Okay, yes, it is. It is being open. That is being open. Okay, I can flip that around and say that, well, are you open to a disagreement? Because I am pretty much sure that woman is going to say, that man or whatever. Okay, if you disagree with me, then I'll be like, okay, but you're not open to having a discussion either. So it can't just be your way. All right, it's a two-way thing here.
Interesting though is that we always seem to fixate though on the trans experience, right? Like that's how it feels for us women, biological women. That's how it feels. We're always focusing on how the trans people feel and how the non-binary people feel. We get left out of the conversation oftentimes. Susie, you can talk in a second. And it's very frustrating for us because there are unique issues that affect us in a way that you will never understand. And that's not to say that your existence is invalid. That's not to say that you're a crappy person or that we should relegate you to the back of the bus. None of that. It's to say that we live in a world that will always be different by the fact that we are born biological women. We are different. We are different. And we can embrace you. We can bring you into the fold and say, cool, there are issues that will, that together we can have and that we can, fight for and what have you. And I'm sure that the existence that, and I always think this to myself, I couldn't even imagine how stressful and painful it must be to be trans because you're sort of fighting against the have and yet the nature that you want to have. That has to be very challenging, and I reconcile that.
Let me
some people it is,
something
for some
here.
people it is. But you know what's very upsetting for us is to be told that our very existence is superseded by the feelings of others. That is how we feel, and it's very, very frustrating.
I'm not in this us.
Let me interject
I'm not
something
including
here.
you.
Let me
Just
interject
take where
something
you
here.
stand on all of
Let me
this.
interject something here while what you said is fresh in everybody's mind. Because I have heard what you've said. You said it very eloquently, but I've heard what you have said here before, almost verbatim, with adding one word. And it was talking about white women, and it was said by a black woman. She said, you can't relate to what a black woman goes through you're a white woman, I'm a black woman, you can't understand what I've been through because you're a white woman. You talk about the struggles that white women have been through. You don't understand struggle because you're not a black woman.
That's exactly
and you've
the
been
point.
through. And so my point is that there are different perspectives and you don't have to agree.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're not open, that you can't weigh that, and that it doesn't cause you to broaden your horizons or broaden your perspectives just because you don't change your definitions.
It's about more than definitions, though, Dr. Phil, in the sense of even recently with the Roe v. Wade stuff, there was a piece of legislation that was put before, I believe, the Senate, and people can correct me on that.
I don't agree with the doctor. I'm not sure what he's trying to go with there because okay, I can't get what he's trying to say. I don't think he used a good example with regards to race. I think the idea that he's kind of going with there is that had she paid attention, or rather when you choose to listen to another person's experience, their lived experience or whatever, be that it's from a racial discrimination point of view and so on, you are sharing in their worldview and what they're going through. That doesn't necessarily mean that ultimately we will agree about everything, because within that issue there is a lot of things that are embedded within discrimination alone. Just discrimination could be racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, whatever the case may be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't topics within the issue. I'll quote Dr. Phil himself. There are topics and there are issues. Dark. So it doesn't mean that just because we are having a discussion in a topic and we listen to each other's perspectives, therefore we are going to agree on the issues. And also because he's talking about two women with regards to this specific issue. It's concerning gender and gender identity and so on. One is about biology and the other one has to do with there's more than just the biological aspect of it, but there's a psychological aspect and a social aspect to it as well that has to be considered. And I don't think because we disagree about certain things within the issue or how we see the issue, therefore we're like choosing to not understand the other one's perspective or anything like that. But anyway, I'm just saying that's just how I'm kind of understanding the doctor there. So I think he's just trying to kind of like get her on a gotcha moment, like gotcha, you were here as a white woman, you couldn't see the other black woman's perspective, so gotcha moment. But anyway, let's just finish up what she's saying.
A piece of legislation that was put before, I believe, the Senate, and people can correct me on that, that didn't once reference women, female, anything. It just said people. And it was in reference to abortion. When I saw that, I thought this is erasing the fact that the majority of women are biologically inclined to give birth. Now, whether they do, like I said before, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you can actually give birth. The fact that you have that anatomy, that is what's very important, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now, when you look at the way the politicians are discussing this, it has ramifications. It affects us, because they're using language that does not represent the 99.96% of the population that identifies as a biological woman.
Yep. I feel that. I feel her. I feel the struggle.